My mother called me into the kitchen on a Tuesday morning, which should have been my first warning. She only ever called family meetings in the kitchen when she had already made up her mind about something and just needed an audience. I was 28. I had been working at my parents' bakery since I was 15. First washing sheet pans after school, then decorating cakes on weekends, then eventually running the social media, managing the supplier contracts, and handling every catering order that came through. I was not an employee. I was never paid like one. I was family, which in our house meant you showed up and you did not ask what you were getting in return. My brother had married his wife 8 months earlier. I liked her fine, or I had, before that Tuesday. My mother set a mug of coffee in front of me and did not sit down. She stood by the counter with her arms crossed, and she said, "We've been talking, your father and I, and we think it's time to make some changes at the shop." I thought she meant the menu. We had been going back and forth about adding a gluten-free line for almost a year. She did not mean the menu. She said my sister-in-law had a background in business administration. She had taken 2 courses at the community college and had done a semester of bookkeeping for her cousin's landscaping company. My mother said the bakery needed real management. She said it with a straight face. She said they were giving my sister-in-law my position. Full oversight of operations, supplier relationships, the catering accounts, the Instagram page I had built from 400 followers to almost 12,000. I waited for the part where she explained what I would be doing instead. She said, "We think you should take some time, figure out what you really want." That was it. 13 years. That was the whole conversation. I asked her what "take some time" meant exactly. Did I still have a job? She looked at the window when she answered. She said they would cover my health insurance through the end of the quarter. She said they hoped I understood. I did not make a scene. I have replayed that morning 100 times and I still cannot tell you if that was strength or shock. I put the mug down on the counter, still half full. And I walked out through the back door. The same door I had been walking through since I was a kid. The little bell above it made the same sound it always made. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, and then I drove to my apartment and I did not go back. My sister-in-law started the following Monday. My brother texted me that weekend. He said he hoped I wasn't too upset. He said it was a business decision. He used those exact words, business decision, like he was forwarding me a memo from someone he had never met. I did not respond for 3 days. When I finally wrote back, I said, "The Instagram account is registered to my personal email and my phone number. The catering inquiry form routes to my Gmail. The Google business profile has my name as manager. If anyone needs access, they can ask me directly." He called immediately. He was not friendly. He said I was being petty. He said I was being petty. He said I was trying to sabotage the family. He said our mother was devastated. I let him talk. When he was done, I said, "I built those accounts on my personal devices, on my personal time, using my own contacts. They're mine." Then I said I had to go, and I hung up. That was the last real conversation I had with any of them for a long time. My best friend Quincy let me cry in her apartment for 2 days straight. She fed me soup and did not say "I told you so," even though she had been saying for years that my family treated me like staff, without the paycheck. On the 3rd day she sat down next to me on the couch and said, "What do you actually want to do? Not what you should do. What do you want?" I had been baking since I was 9 years old. It was the only thing I had ever been good at without trying. The thought of never doing it again made my chest feel like something was sitting on it. But the thought of doing it for my family again made me feel the same way. I said, "I want my own place." She said, "Okay, so let's find you one." I had savings. Not a lot, but some. I had been careful with money my whole adult life, mostly because I had watched my parents be careless with theirs, and I had seen what that did to a family. I had about $14,000 in a separate account that my mother did not know about. I had started it after a conversation 3 years earlier where she had casually mentioned that everything would come to the kids eventually, in a tone that made me understand I was not supposed to need anything in the meantime. Quincy knew a woman who was closing her sandwich shop in a small commercial strip about 12 minutes from my parents' bakery. The space was already permitted for food service. The equipment was old but functional. The rent was $1,800 a month, which in that area was almost reasonable. I walked through it on a Thursday afternoon in February. It smelled like industrial cleaner and old fryer oil, and the drop ceiling had a water stain in one corner. I stood in the middle of the empty kitchen and thought about the fact that nobody in that room had ever told me I was just in the way. That felt like enough to start with. I signed a lease 2 weeks later. I did not tell my family. I used the $14,000 for first and last month's rent, a used display case I found on Facebook Marketplace, and enough supplies to do a soft opening. I called in every favor I had ever been owed. A woman I had done a wedding cake for 2 years earlier let me borrow her commercial mixer for the first month. A supplier I had been buying from on behalf of my parents for 6 years gave me net 30 terms on my first order because he said, and I am quoting him directly, "I always liked working with you better anyway." I named it Clover & Co. I made a logo on my phone using a free app. I posted one photo on a new Instagram account. A tray of morning buns, golden and sugar-dusted, shot in the early light coming through the front window. And I wrote, "Small batch, made from scratch, opening soon." I tagged the neighborhood. I went to sleep. By morning there were 400 likes and 62 comments asking when we were opening. I opened on a Saturday in March with 4 items on the menu: the morning buns, a brown butter blondie, a savory cheddar scallion scone, and a rotating special that first week was a blood orange olive oil cake. I had 3 dozen of each. I sold out by 10:15. I stood in the empty display case afterward, and I actually laughed out loud, alone in my own bakery, because I did not know what else to do with that feeling. Quincy came by that afternoon to help me clean up. She brought champagne in a paper bag and we drank it out of coffee cups sitting on the floor because I did not own any proper glasses yet. She said, "You know your mom's going to hear about this eventually." I said, "I know." She said, "What are you going to do when she does?" I said, "Keep baking." The neighborhood found us fast. There is a particular kind of loyalty in small commercial strips. The regulars become regulars within weeks, not months, because they want you to survive, and they tell their people, and their people tell theirs. By the end of April, I had a line on weekend mornings. I hired one part-time person, a culinary student named, actually it doesn't matter what her name was. She was 22 and fast, and she did not complain about anything, and I paid her $4 above minimum wage because I remembered what it felt like to work hard for people who thought your time was a given. I started doing catering again in May, small stuff at first. Office breakfasts, a baby shower, a retirement party for a woman who had been a regular at my parents' bakery for years and who had found me through Instagram and sent me a long message that I read 3 times. She said she had wondered where I went. I did not explain. I just said I had opened my own place and I would love to do her party, and I gave her my pricing sheet and she booked it the same day. My parents found out in June. I do not know exactly how. My guess is that same retired regular mentioned it to my mother at some point, or someone saw the Instagram and recognized the aesthetic, which I will admit was not entirely unrelated to what I had built for them. You spend 13 years developing a visual identity for something and it tends to follow you. Either way, my mother called me on a Wednesday evening and she did not say hello. She said, "You opened a bakery." I said, "Yes." She said, 12 minutes from ours. I said, 11 actually. There was a silence. Then she said I was trying to hurt them. She said I was doing this on purpose. She said she couldn't believe her own daughter would do something like this to her family. She cried. I had grown up watching my mother use tears the way other people use exclamation points, frequently, and not always because she meant them. So I waited. When she finished, I said, "I needed to work. You took away my job. I found a new one." She said that was not fair. I said, "Mom, I was there for 13 years. She said things had been difficult lately. I said I knew. I said I had been managing their supplier contracts and their catering accounts and their social media for 6 of those years without a salary, and that when that stopped being convenient for the family, I was let go in a 10-minute kitchen conversation. I did not say it with anger. I was surprised, actually, by how calm I was. It felt less like confrontation and more like finally reading a document out loud that I had been carrying folded up in my pocket for a long time. She hung up. My brother called an hour later. He was angrier than she was. He said I had stolen their business model. He said I had used relationships I built on their behalf to poach their clients. He said the retired regular had switched her standing weekly order to my shop, and did I think that was right? I said I hadn't solicited her. She had found me and reached out. He said that wasn't the point. I said I wasn't sure what the point was then. He hung up too. My sister-in-law did not call. That was honestly the most interesting part. Late summer. The shop had been open for 6 months. We had a Google rating of 4.8 on just over 200 reviews. I had a second part-time employee. I was starting to look at what it would cost to extend my hours into the evening 2 nights a week. Do a small wine and cheese thing, something different. The neighborhood had a gap in that market. I had done the numbers. One night in August, my landlord mentioned, not unkindly, that the space next to mine was opening up. It had been a dry cleaner. He said I had first right of refusal if I wanted to expand. I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 4 days, and then I said yes. I do not think I made that decision to hurt my family. I want to be honest about that because I've spent a lot of time making sure I am not doing things for the wrong reasons. I made it because the business was ready, because the numbers supported it, and because I had spent 13 years waiting for someone else to decide when I got to take up more space. I was done waiting. The expansion opened in October. New seating area, a small coffee program, the evening hours I had been planning. I hired 2 more people. I finally bought proper glasses. I did not invite my family to the opening. A woman from the neighborhood paper came and wrote a small piece about us. It ran on a Thursday. By Saturday, we had a wait for the first time. I stood behind the counter watching people sit in the space I had built. And I thought about that Tuesday morning in my mother's kitchen. The coffee mug I left half full on the counter. The bell above the back door. I thought about it and then I took the next order. November came. I got a voicemail from my brother that I saved and have not deleted. He said the bakery was struggling. He said my sister-in-law had found the operations more complicated than expected. He said the catering accounts had dropped off significantly after I left, which he said with a particular kind of emphasis that I think was supposed to make me feel guilty but mostly just made me feel tired. He said the family was under a lot of stress. He said he hoped I could find it in my heart to come back. He did not apologize. I did not call back that day. I sat with it for a week. I talked to Quincy about it. She said, what would going back actually look like? And I realized I had no answer because going back would mean my sister-in-law stepping aside, which my brother would never ask for, which meant going back was not actually on the table. The offer was not a real offer. It was a way to make me responsible for their problem. I texted my brother. I said I was sorry things were hard. I said I was not in a position to return. I said I wished them well, and I meant it. The way you can mean something, and also know it doesn't change anything. He did not respond. The first Sunday in December, just after 8 in the morning, I was opening the shop. It was cold, and the street was quiet, the way it gets early on weekend mornings before the neighborhood wakes up. I was unlocking the front door when I saw a car I recognized pull up. My mother got out, then my brother, then my sister-in-law. They stood on the sidewalk. My mother was wearing the coat she always wore in winter, the heavy one with the wooden buttons. She looked tired. She said my name. Then she said they had been wrong. She said it plainly, standing there in the cold, which was more than I had expected. She said they needed help. She said the bakery owed back payments on 2 supplier accounts and they were behind on their commercial insurance, and she asked if I could loan them money. $12,000 was the number she said. I stood in my doorway with my keys still in my hand. I thought about the morning buns I had sold out of on my opening day. I thought about the paper cups Quincy and I drank champagne from on the floor. I thought about 13 years of Tuesday mornings and sheet pans and supplier negotiations and an Instagram account built from nothing that I handed over because no one had thought to ask if I minded. I said, "Mom, I can't do that." She said she understood I was upset. I said I wasn't upset. I said I was open. I said I had a delivery arriving in 40 minutes and I needed to get started. I said I hoped they were able to work something out. My brother started to say something. I don't know what. I went inside and I turned the lock behind me. I did not watch them leave. I went back to the kitchen and I started on the morning buns. I measured out the flour the same way I always have, the same way my grandmother taught me, spooned into the cup and leveled off with a straight edge. The dough came together the way it always does. The oven was already warm. Outside I could hear the street starting to fill up the way it does on Sunday mornings in that neighborhood. Someone walking a dog. A car idling, then pulling away. By 9 o'clock there was a line out the door. By 10 the display case was half empty and the coffee machine had not stopped running, and my part-time person was restocking the pastry trays, and someone's little kid was pressed against the glass looking at the morning buns. And I heard her say to her dad, "Can we get that one?" He said yes. Of course, that's the whole point. The thing nobody tells you about starting over is that it does not feel like starting over. It feels like continuing the part of your life that actually belonged to you, the part that other people had borrowed for a while and eventually had to give back. The flour is the same flour. The dough is the same dough. The dough is the same dough. The difference is whose name is on the door. The morning light comes through my front windows at an angle that I have never seen anywhere else. I noticed it the first time I walked through the empty space. Before the display case, before the sign, before any of it. I have never mentioned it to anyone because it sounds like a small thing and maybe it is. But it is there every morning. And every morning it lands in the same place. And it is mine.